When I get the chance to talk about Macho Man Randy Savage, I'm going to take it 10 times out of 10. And I've got the great honor of chatting with Jon Finkel today, the author of the book Macho Man, The Untamed, Unbelievable Life of Randy Savage. And today, as of the day of this recording, is a big day. It's release day for the book. So, Jon, thanks for taking time out of your busy day to chat with me, and congrats on the release.
You got it. Thank you. It's wall to wall macho today. And like you said, opening, that's a good day. It's a good day to have.
Absolutely. So, what about you? Have you been a fan of his, or is this something that you picked up along the way because of his intriguing story?
Oh, no. I've been a fan of macho since I became a fan of wrestling when I was 6 or 7 years old or even earlier. So I was I grew up at the peak macho madness time. So I was, 6, 7, and 8 from WrestleMania 3, 4, 5, and 6. And like my first favorite wrestler was Big John Studd, who I used to call myself Little John Studd, and I would draw little blue stars on my sides of my shorts or whatever. And then when Macho burst on the scene, just the reason we all gravitated towards him, the charisma, the uniqueness, the craziness, the catchphrases, or back then they weren't even catchphrases, you just kind of repeated the things he did, the twitching, the moving around was amazing. And then, probably for me, one of the coolest things was he wasn't a big behemoth. He wasn't Andre the Giant or Hulk or Big John Studd or one of these guys. I could lay my brother on the ground and hit him with the elbow drop off the bed, like the top rope. Yeah, I could do all those things. I didn't have to be 6'7", 300 pounds to do it. So all of that added up. I was a huge Macho Man fan. And then when I became an author, one of my bucket list biographies was always to do machos, and thankfully no one else did it.
Sounds like you have maybe a couple of years on me. I was certainly did my research as a kid on WrestleMania 3, but it was like I think WrestleMania 5, which is Macho Man and Hulk Hogan, was my
Yeah,
first
nice.
real introduction into pro wrestling as a kid. But yeah, that era and especially him just enthralled youngsters, and really haven't seen anybody like him since. And I want to talk about that. But I want to get into some specifics here. You've written books about athletes, famous athletes, and sports figures like Mean Joe Green. What made you want to write about Randy Savage? Why was he the next one for you?
Yeah, I always look for athletes or people or events who are one of ones, right? Like kind of the unicorns things they always talk about in sports. People who have never, there's nobody like them. There's not like a through line of all these kinds of people. The first biography I did was on Charlie Ward, who won a Heisman Trophy, national championship with Florida State, and then has a career in the NBA and plays point guard in the NBA Finals. I'm confident in saying we are not going to see a Heisman Trophy winner play point guard in the NBA Finals ever again, right? And so
Yep.
things like that. The book before this, I did a biography of the year 1996, which I think is like a line of demarcation in sports and pop culture. For there's before 96 and after, as far as all the people who came into our sports world from that point on. And Macho Man fits that bill. And there's no one, he says nobody does it better, but really the baseball career itself is fascinating. It's a look at someone who came so close to achieving his dream. And then when that door was slammed on him, the book really is a story of transformation, because he actually then embarks on this wrestling career. He's already, in his 20s, and we don't hear from him fan wise until he's almost 30. He's in the territories and things on a national stage. And then just the uniqueness of talent and the uniqueness of his accomplishments. He drew people in like nobody else. And to this day, it's timeless. My son is 11 and does a Macho Man impression, and was 9 when I started this book, and watched all the WrestleManias and all the Piper's Pits and all the old stuff with me, and became equally fascinated. So he's generationally, you can't beat him.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize the sort of career that Macho Man could have had playing pro baseball. Could you detail that a little bit? Just what his career arc was going to be had he not suffered an injury?
Yeah, he was the best baseball player anyone knew in his town, all the way growing up. I mean, his father is Angelo Poffo, was a famous mid-level famous guy in the territories, but he was famous around the local Chicago area because of the Sunday morning shows, so people knew who he was. But Randy was a baseball player. His room was decorated in baseball stuff, baseball cards, baseball helmets, posters on the wall. From the time he was probably in 4th or 5th grade, until the day his dream died, he was going to be a baseball player in his mind. Everybody in his neighborhood who you talked to, all his friends, everyone on his little league team, every single person he talked to that I interviewed for this book who knew him honestly before he was age 23 was like, yeah, Randy was the best. He was in Little League, you couldn't get him out. He had a rocket arm. He practiced harder than anybody else. They built, his father and other neighborhood dads built a batting cage on the side of the house, like a legit, because he lived in Chicago. There was no, nowadays there's batting cages everywhere. There's indoor rec centers. There's all these things. Back then, there was really no place to go. So they built the length of the house. They made sure that the mound to the home plate was 60 feet, 6 inches, just like major leagues, just to get him prepared for it. They bought thousands of balls and tons of bats. They bought a pitching machine, and he could be out there till midnight. They bought lights so they could play at night. And so this was his dream. And when he got to the minors, he did okay in the beginning. The common theme from a lot of the coaches, and there's some great stories in there about his work ethic and intensity and fights getting hit and all these kind of things. But the theme from some of the scouts and managers was that if there was a Major League Baseball of really, really good, he would be in it. But Major League Baseball is for the best of the best, and he just didn't quite have it.
And that's the thing that I've noticed in all the stories I've heard about Randy Savage, the person, is the relentlessness, the intensity, I think is a word that most people that dig into his story talk about. It seems like whatever he was going to do, you've heard the street sweeper analogy. He was just going to be the best at whatever he kind of put his mind to. Baseball is different because you have to have a certain talent level, but his intensity was unlike anybody, and he was going to make sure that he succeeded in just about anything he did, it seems.
Yeah, that was from his dad. His dad was a really intense, driven guy. They were a family focused on fitness, focused on accomplishment and achievement. They wanted to entertain, but they also they wanted to be the best at whatever they were doing. And so Randy really honed his ability to practice and his ability to take something from nothing. He was not even as good as he was in baseball. He wasn't one of these guys who just naturally flew around the base pass. He didn't have a swing like Ken Griffey Jr., where it just looked like it was just carved out of, an art from God, and just like he could hit. Like, this is a guy who he hit 500 his junior year in high school, and had read that, scouts were more impressed and were more likely to take someone who could switch hit. So he learned to hit. He spent his summer between his junior and senior year learning to hit lefty. And he actually hit 500 again his senior year from both sides of the plate. Wow. His coach, his high school coach who I spoke to, said he actually had more power from lefty, which is insane because he taught himself to do that midway through his prime high school baseball playing life. And that kind of tenacity, when he decided to become a wrestler, was really, really critical.
The thing about Randy that I understand is that he also, and this I think speaks to what you were just talking about, really brought his character to life in a way that he became the Macho Man. And I'm not sure, I never lived it behind the scenes, but I'm just guessing, and I'm curious to know, based on the people you've talked to, was he in the thick of his prime, in his wrestling prime, when he was the star that he became? Was he able to separate the fantasy from reality as far as who he was as a person and a character?
No. The answer to that is no. He was, he went from Randy Poffo, wannabe, Major League Baseball player, and in the middle there, before we got to know him, there was Randy Savage, before he picked up the Macho Man part. So the Randy Savage, the book is divided into 3 distinct parts. It's Randy Poffo, Randy Savage, and then Macho Man. And it really is an evolution. And when I talked to Lanny, his brother, it was like, Randy Poffo is the guy everybody knew, who grew up with. He was a very soft-spoken. He was an intense kid, but he was not outwardly social. He wasn't the center of attention. Most of the people that you talk to just, didn't have a whole lot to say because there was nothing. He wasn't the Macho Man. He was just a regular kid trying to play baseball. Randy Savage is really where he digs deep and turns on, turns his personality all the way up to a 10, gets the wrestling style of being, crazy man all throughout the ring, starts the twitching, starts growing the hair out. He really did the total opposite of minor leaguers. It's like the George Costanza theory of I'm just going to do the opposite. Like he was clean shaven and short hair because he had to be for minor league baseball for most of it. And then he lets his hair go crazy and grows the beard that we all know him from there. And so once, the Randy Savage part, like Randy Poffo maybe had one hand on the wheel. And then once Macho Man emerged, and this was a lot of work. This wasn't like he stumbled into the Macho Man character. He and Lanny had endless conversations about what this character would look like, what it would be, where the voice would come from, what the name would be. But once there was two hands on the Macho Man, on the driving the bus, Randy Poffo was gone. Randy Savage was mostly gone. And yeah, I mean, one of the reasons when you do the research and some of the stories and talk to some of the wrestlers, why he was so intense and why he was for some people difficult to be around was because, at the end of the Hulkster winning a match, he went home to his wife and he was Terry, the man. And at the end of the Macho Man winning a match, he went home to Elizabeth and was the Macho Man.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see that. And I guess that might be the answer to this question, which is why haven't we seen anybody like him since in this world of larger than life characters? And not to say there haven't been great stars since Macho Man, but there's never been anybody still to this day that's like him. And
Yeah,
he would be such an imitatable character because of the way he presented himself, but nobody's really been able to pull it off. Why do you think that is?
I think he was unique. He somehow made all of the neon and the hats and the outfit, because when he came in wrestling, he wore capes. He was very Ric Flair. He wore big giant capes and all those kind of things. But when he finally broke off from that and started wearing, he hired this guy Michael Braun to do all his outfits. He had hundreds and hundreds of outfits. He never wore the same thing twice. All the neon colors and the tassels and the hats and everything was to take up space because he was kind of a smaller guy compared to wrestlers. It was almost like you couldn't picture him without those things. And so he seemed natural, and wearing a guy, when you think about how ridiculous it is for a guy named Macho Man to be wearing a purple shirt with his face on the shirt, with the sunglasses on the shirt that says Macho Man, when it's not even his real name. Like in almost all other parts of adult life, it's an absurdity. But you look at him and it's like, yeah, this makes total sense. I mean, nobody else, he made up a style of sunglasses. I mean, nobody had those. It wasn't like, oh yeah, everybody's wearing those in Santa Cruz or something. Like he just wore those sunglasses and everything was unique and original. And I don't think when you combine the outfit with the phrases he used were stuff that he spent a lot of time thinking of, but he was also very smart. He was an honor society kid in high school. He was a chess player, he was a poker player. He was very, very well read. You can't just put those things together and be another person. There's a couple of people I think who are maybe in the vein of who Macho Man is now, but there's just no way to add all that together and to do it with the charisma, which we can't measure, right? He just had, even in the early days when he was in the territories, and I interviewed all these guys, they were like, there was this thing called he'd sell out the curtain, and what that phrase meant in the territories was all the other wrestlers who had already worked or were going to be going on the ring next would end up like peeking through the curtain to see what he was doing out of like a sign of respect. And then they all said nobody touched Macho. He would be performing and there'd be 7 wrestlers looking behind the whole runway, seeing what he was doing because the audience was going crazy.
That's great. The relationship that he had with Miss Elizabeth was a unique one. He was very protective, very jealous, very guarded. How much of that is covered in the book?
Yeah, I cover how they met, how they got together. I tried to go more into the behind the scenes, what their lives were like on the road. I mean, a couple of documentaries have come out and they've really focused on the sensational type of things, which anybody who watched wrestling back then knew he was nuts. And one of the things that's really clear as you read the book, you'll understand that he was brought in specifically to be a heel. And in the beginning, the first, several years of him being with Miss Elizabeth, she was there specifically to make him, so he would have someone you would feel, you'd feel bad for her that she was stuck with this brute of a guy. He treated her poorly on purpose for so long that it had to have bled over. I mean, some of the early things he said to her in some of these promos would not fly today. Yeah. And certainly, I am sure, I'm married, like he was married they were already married when they came up together, which most of us didn't know. There had to be moments, because she was a young Southern, lady, after like a promo, she had to go in the back room being like, all right, Randy, like dial it back just a little bit.
Oh man. So who's next? I don't know if you're ready to have that conversation yet. This is the day of your book release, but you talk about, I find it so fascinating, the people that you've covered and the stories the one of ones, as you've called them. Do you have an idea of what the next project is, or are you just basking in this for a moment?
No, I do. I always overlap. When you write a book, you finish the actual manuscript, a while back, 4 to 6 months before this. There's a long editing process, fact checking process, research, proofreading, layout. All these things have to happen. So you have a lot of idle time. And I've always been able to finish one. You want to have a couple months break to the manuscript when you're done, because you spend a year plus writing it to then dive back in as well as you can with fresh eyes. So yes, there is. I can't announce it yet, but I will certainly. It's wrestling adjacent, let's say. So it'll be somebody that everybody's excited about talking, and I'll come back on and share it with you guys.
That's awesome. Where can people follow you? It's especially if they want that update.
Yeah, any updates? So if you're just on social media, I'm at Jon_Finkel at Twitter and Instagram, and then my website is jonfinkel.com. Anyone who goes on there, you'll see the first thing. I have a newsletter called Books and Biceps, where I interview a ton of authors that you might like. I recommend a book every week, workout motivation. I should put all my columns on there. I have a ton of cool Macho Man giveaways that are on there as well. So if you're on, you want to really know the most up-to-date stuff that I have, or the books that I have are coming out. But really, week to week, 52, 51 weeks a year, I'm recommending other books by other authors that you'll like. It's only when mine comes out that I talk about mine. Join that, and that's kind of the best place to follow week to week what's going on.
That's awesome. Jon Finkel, he's the author of the book Macho Man, The Untamed, Unbelievable Life of Randy Savage. Love talking some Macho Man with you, a pillar of my childhood. Thanks, Jon.
You got it. Thank you. And go buy the book. We got to take down Becky Lynch. She's number one right now. She's got the whole engine behind her. Let's go.
It's Amazon, and then are they selling books anywhere else these days?
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Everywhere you're going to order them, go for it. Whatever you want to do is fine. But we've been joking internally with the Macho Man versus the Man, and we keep coming close. And then she'll have like Seth Rollins, her husband, promote something, and it's like, oh, we can't. So help us out. Let's go. Let's take the Macho Man up to the cream of the crop.
Well, hopefully this interview on this show will help catapult things.
Yes.
Cream
rocket launcher.
All right. See you, man.
Thank you. See you.